It was 5:47 in the morning. The lights inside Danny's diner buzzed like always. That pale, tired glow over cracked floors and old red booths that had seen way better days. Maya Cole tied her apron, same as always, fast, quiet, like someone who had done it exactly 247 times before. She knew the number because she had been counting since day one, 19 months ago, back when this job felt like hitting the very bottom. Now it just felt like surviving. She was 27 years old. Her whole life fit inside a 430 square foot apartment in Brooklyn. $1,600 a month for a place where gunshots outside didn't even make her flinch anymore. She had heard them so many times, they just became another sound in the dark. She had $2,813 in her bank account. $520 in student loan debt. From a nursing degree she never finished. A faded scar running along her left wrist that she kept hidden under a leather bracelet she never took off. And a head full of memories that came back to haunt her in the quiet hours. To really understand who Maya Cole was, you have to go back 3 years to a nursing home called Golden Pines in Westchester, where a 24-year-old nursing assistant worked the night shift. Caring for elderly people the rest of the world had completely forgotten. The pay was $14.75 an hour. The hours were brutal, 11 at night to 7 in the morning, 5 nights a week, the kind of work that broke most people in 6 months. Changing diapers, cleaning up messes, listening to patients cry for family who never showed up, watching bodies and minds that were once full of life slowly fade away. But Maya loved it, not the hard parts. Nobody loves scrubbing a bedpan at 3 in the morning, but the people. The patients who still had stories to tell if anyone would just sit down and listen. Those moments of real connection that only happened in the dark. When fear and loneliness stripped everything away and left nothing but raw human truth. One patient changed everything. Rose Bellini arrived at Golden Pines on a rainy Tuesday in March. She looked like a woman who had simply given up on being alive. 73 years old, early-stage dementia. Her paperwork said no family, no emergency contact. No one who would notice if she vanished in the night. Maya noticed. She noticed how Rose's hands shook when she tried to hold a glass of water. She noticed the photographs Rose kept hidden under her pillow. Images of a dark-haired little boy with serious gray eyes, growing frame by frame into a sharp-jawed young man with a faint scar along his jaw. A man Maya had never seen walk through the door, not once. She noticed how Rose whispered a name in her sleep over and over again. Damien, Damien, I'm sorry. And when Maya searched that name late one night on her cracked phone, what she found made her blood run cold, because the son who abandoned this fragile little woman wasn't just some rich businessman too busy to visit his mom. He was Damien Bellini, and the streets of New York whispered his name with the kind of fear that doesn't come from money alone. But here's what Maya didn't know yet, the thing that would shatter everything she believed about this man she had already learned to hate. For the 14 months that followed, Maya became Rose's whole world, and Rose became hers. Every night when the nursing home got quiet, while the other nurses sat scrolling on their phones at the desk, Maya pulled a white plastic chair up to Rose's bed and read to her. Cheap romance novels with shirtless guys on the cover and love stories, so sweet they made your teeth hurt. But Rose's eyes lit up every single time Maya turned a new page, and that alone made 3 in the morning feel worth it. She brushed Rose's thin silver hair every evening before bed, gently working through every small tangle. She held Rose's hand through the worst nights, the nights when the dementia turned Rose into a terrified child who didn't know where she was, didn't know who she was, only knew how to scream and cry and claw at the bed rails, until Maya wrapped her in her arms and whispered, "You're safe, you're loved, I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere." Then there were the lucid moments, rare and precious, like the last drops of water in a desert. And in those moments, Rose told Maya the story of the son she had loved her entire life. "I raised him on my own," Rose said one night, her voice unusually clear like the illness had stepped back for a few minutes. His father left when he was just 3 years old. I worked 3 jobs at once, Maya, washing dishes, sewing clothes, cleaning offices at night. I slept 4 hours a day for 15 years, just so he could go to school, wear clean clothes, eat full meals. Rose's eyes filled with a pride that 4 years of being abandoned had not been able to kill. And he did it, Maya, more than I ever dared to dream. He built an empire. Then the light in her eyes slowly faded. But somewhere along the way, he forgot me. 4 years, child. 4 years. He hasn't walked through that door even once. Every month, a check for $17.5 arrives here, regular as a clock, but he never shows up. He thinks money is love. He thinks if he pays someone else to care for his mother, he doesn't have to actually care. Rose didn't cry as she said those things. She just stared out the dark window. And Maya realized there's a kind of pain that goes beyond crying. A kind of pain that has lived inside a person for so long, it becomes part of their bones. And that was the moment Maya began to hate Damian Bellini. With a fury so sharp, it surprised even herself. She had seen his face in those photographs under the pillow. She had searched his name on her cracked phone screen. She had read articles about Bellini Holdings, about suspected money laundering, about court cases where witnesses suddenly disappeared, about business rivals who vanished without a trace. Each article added another layer of proof that this man was not just a son who abandoned his mother. He was a cold, dangerous monster. And every night after Rose drifted to sleep and started whispering that name in her dreams, Maya sat beside her bed and made a promise to herself. Even if the whole world forgot Rose Bellini, she never would. Even if that powerful son couldn't be bothered to walk through the door, she would always be here. Because Maya Cole knew what it felt like to be left behind, and she swore she would never let anyone feel that way if she could stop it. Then everything collapsed. On a regular Monday morning, the management called all the staff into the conference room. They announced that Golden Pines had been sold to a big corporation called Crestline Healthcare, and that necessary changes would be made to optimize operational efficiency. Those necessary changes meant cutting 1/3 of the staff, reducing hours for those who stayed, replacing hot meals with frozen dinners reheated in a microwave, and eliminating what they called non-essential services, which included Maya's nighttime reading sessions, the hair brushing, the conversations she considered the whole soul of caregiving. Maya looked at that list and felt something ignite inside her chest. She thought of Rose lying alone in a dark room with no one reading to her. She thought of other patients crying with no one to hold their hands. And she did what anyone who knew Maya Cole could have predicted. She spoke up. She protested at the staff meeting. She filed a formal complaint to the new board. She refused to stop reading to Rose at night, even after she was ordered to stop. 3 weeks later, the new manager called her into his office. A man in a gray suit who had never once set foot in a patient's room. Sitting behind a big oak desk, looking at her like she was a number on a spreadsheet. "You are not a nurse, Miss Cole," he said, cold and flat. "You are a nursing assistant, easily replaced. Frankly, your attitude does not align with our new corporate culture." They gave her no time to pack up. They didn't let her finish her shift. 2 security guards walked her to the door like she was a criminal. Not someone who had spent 14 months awake through the night taking care of people. Maya made it halfway across the parking lot. Then she stopped, turned around, and ran back inside, through the front doors, down the corridors her feet knew by heart. She was close to Rose's room, close enough to smell that familiar mix of talcum powder and old books, when a 3rd guard stepped right in front of the door and blocked her, and in that moment she heard it. Rose's voice, behind the closed door, thin, panicked, desperate. "Maya, Maya, is that you? Where are you? Don't leave me." The door slammed shut. Security dragged Maya back to the parking lot, and Rose's voice faded behind those cold white walls. That was the last time Maya heard Rose Bellini's voice. The 19 months that followed were 19 months of quiet hell. Maya called Golden Pines 17 times in the first month, Every time the same answer, "We do not transfer calls to patients. This is facility policy." She went there in person 3 times. Every time the receptionist scanned her name and shook her head. "Former employees who have been terminated have no access to patient areas." She wrote letters. 7 of them in the first 6 months, each one telling Rose that she thought of her every single day, that she was sorry that she hadn't left by choice, but not one letter was ever answered, and Maya had no way of knowing if Rose ever even received them, or if they were thrown in the trash the second they arrived. Not knowing was the worst part. It kept Rose suspended between alive and gone inside Maya's mind. How far had the dementia gone? Did Rose still remember her? Did she think Maya had abandoned her too? One more person disappearing, one more promise broken. That thought ate Maya alive from the inside. Every night in her Brooklyn studio, she lay staring at water stains on the ceiling. And the same dream came back. Rose sitting in a dark room at Golden Pines calling Maya's name through a glass door. Maya standing on the other side. Seeing her, hearing her, pounding her hands against the glass until her fingers bled, but the door never opening. And Rose calling, until Maya jolted awake in the middle of the night, soaked in sweat, with that voice still ringing in her ears like it never stopped. But the rent was still $1,600 a month, and the student loan was still $323 a month, and food was whatever she could afford after the tip money ran out. So every morning at 5:47, Maya tied on her apron and tried not to think about all the ways life had let her down. The morning shift was the hardest, 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. Office workers rushed in for coffee. Construction guys ate eggs and bacon. Retirees lingered for hours over decaf because they had nowhere to go and no one waiting at home. Maya knew every order by heart. Table 4, 3 scrambled eggs, wheat toast, black coffee, extra napkins. Table 7, Denver omelet with home fries, and for the love of God, don't forget the hot sauce again. The window booth, Earl, 78 years old, widowed, a former plumber who ordered the same thing every single day, French toast with bacon, and always left exactly $3.50 on a $1.12, 75 check. Maya liked Earl. She liked all her regulars. They reminded her that showing up every day still has dignity. That sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is simply remember their name and ask how they're doing. Danny Petro, the diner owner, 63 years old, round belly, hands always greasy, a heart bigger than his cramped kitchen. He treated Maya like the daughter he never had. He didn't ask why her eyes were red at the start of some shifts. He didn't ask about the leather bracelet. He just put extra bacon on her staff meal and said, "Eat up, kid, you're too skinny." That was how Danny Petro said, "I care about you," without ever asking you to explain anything. Then there was Layla, her only real coworker friend, 24 years old. Pink hair, talked about 3 times more than necessary, but had this strange ability to make Maya laugh on days she thought she'd forgotten how. One afternoon after their shift, sharing cold fries at the staff table, Layla asked about the leather bracelet. And for the first time in a very long while, Maya told her, not because she wanted pity, but because sometimes keeping everything inside for too long is its own kind of self-destruction. She said it in a flat voice, like reading the weather. Her mom, Patricia Cole, was a waitress for 31 years. 6 days a week, never called in sick once. She died when Maya was 15, lung cancer, 3 months from diagnosis to the end. Her stepfather, Rex, arrived when Maya was 9. He smelled like cheap whiskey and carried anger without a cause. The scar on her wrist, hidden under that bracelet, came from the night Rex got drunk and shoved her into a glass cabinet door when she was 13. The glass shattered, cut so deep she could see bone. The neighbors called 911, but Rex told the paramedics the girl had fallen on her own. No one questioned it further because no one wanted trouble. After her mother died, Maya went into foster care. 2 years, 4 different families, None of them kept her longer than 6 months. She ran away at 17. Took a bus to New York with $140 in her pocket and a backpack holding everything she owned. For the first 3 months, she slept in a beat-up 1996 Honda Civic she bought for $200 from a junkyard in Jersey. She parked in a different Walmart lot each night so security wouldn't chase her off. She told all of it in that flat, calm voice. No shaking, no catching her breath, not a single tear, and it was that calm that was what finally broke Layla. The pink-haired girl sat across from her with the cold fries forgotten between them, and cried. She cried the tears for Maya that Maya had run out of long ago. Or maybe had never allowed herself to cry at all. It happened on a Saturday morning, no warning, no signs. No gut feeling, just an ordinary Saturday at Danny's diner. The smell of burnt coffee, the hiss of grease on the flat top. Maya was pouring a refill for Earl in the window booth when the doorbell rang. She didn't look up right away. That bell rang 100 times a shift. Not once had it ever changed her life until this time. 2 men walked in first. Big, broad-shouldered, dressed in black from head to toe, moving with the kind of precision that says, these men were trained to walk into a room and spot every threat in 3 seconds. The first one swept his eyes from left to right, pausing at every booth, every corner, every exit. The second, taller, face carved from stone, blocked the doorway with his whole body until the first gave a nod. Maya watched them from the coffee station. Her stomach tightened. The survival instinct of a kid raised in Brooklyn immediately recognized what kind of men these were. Then the door opened wider, and a wheelchair was pushed inside, and Maya's whole world stopped. She was smaller than Maya remembered. Thinner, silver hair, a more hollow, doubt face. Shoulders that had once stayed straight under the weight of a lifetime, now curved like gravity, had finally won. But it was Rose Bellini, the woman Maya had read to every night for 14 months, the woman whose hair she had brushed, whose hand she had held, to whom she had promised she would never leave, before being dragged away without ever getting to say goodbye. Rose was here, in her diner, less than 10 steps away, and the man pushing her wheelchair was the face Maya had stared at in those photographs 1,000 nights. Only now, in real life, he was colder, more dangerous, more real than any picture could ever show. Tall, black suit, dark hair, gray eyes scanning the room with a slowness that said, I own every space I walk into. Damien Bellini, the coffee tray in Maya's hands tilted. She nearly dropped it, saved only because 247 shifts had trained her body to keep balance even when her mind was shattering. She set the tray on the counter with shaking hands and stood frozen in the middle of the diner, surrounded by the smell of coffee and bacon grease and clattering plates. And everything around her disappeared until only Rose's face remained. Then Rose looked up, and those aged eyes met Maya's across the diner. Across 19 months of being kept apart, across every unanswered letter and every blocked call and every dream of a glass door that wouldn't open. Recognition flashed across Rose's face like sunlight breaking through clouds, and she began to cry immediately. Without a single second to think, her body recognized Maya before her mind could even find the words. Maya, her voice was thinner and more fragile than Maya remembered, but completely, unmistakably hers. Maya, is that you, my life, saving angel? The large stone-faced man Victor stepped forward immediately, blocking the space between Maya and the wheelchair, his right hand slipping inside his jacket by reflex. In a way Maya understood but didn't care about, not right now, not when Rose was crying and reaching for her. Damien gave Victor a small nod, almost invisible. Victor stepped aside, though his eyes never left Maya. Maya didn't look at Victor. She didn't look at Damien. She went straight to Rose, dropped to her knees beside the wheelchair, and hugged her, held her so tight she could feel every fragile bone beneath that cardigan. And Rose held back with the startling strength of someone who believed she would never hug this person again. They both cried. They didn't speak for nearly a full minute, just cried, right there in the middle of Danny's diner at 9 in the morning. With Earl sitting frozen mid-bite, Layla behind the counter with her hand over her mouth, and Danny leaning out the kitchen window to see what was happening. When Maya finally let go and stood up, her face wet, her eyes raw, she turned to the man standing in silence beside his mother's wheelchair. She looked straight into the cold gray eyes of Damian Bellini, the boss whose name, the streets of New York, whispered with fear. The man she had hated for 19 months, and her voice shook, but it didn't back down 1 inch. 4 years, Maya said. She waited for you 4 years. Damian Bellini didn't move, didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't respond with coldness or power or any of the things Maya had read about him. He just stood there, and for the first time in a very long time, the most powerful mob boss in New York had nothing to say. Damian said nothing more inside the diner. He sat in silence, watching his mother hold Maya's hand and cry for 20 minutes. Watching like a man seeing something he couldn't understand. When Rose finally calmed down, Damian signaled Victor. Victor stepped up to Maya and handed her a black business card. Silver letters, no title, just the name Damian Bellini and a phone number. Mr. Bellini would like to meet with you privately, Victor said, flat as a contract reading, whenever you're available. Maya looked at the card. Then she set it on the counter with 2 fingers like it was dirty. I don't need anything from Mr. Bellini, she said. Tell him that. Victor didn't blink. He just placed the card back in front of her. He knew you'd say that. He asked me to tell you this isn't about him. This is about his mother. And that was when Rose, the 76-year-old woman in the wheelchair a few yards away, spoke in a voice Maya could never refuse. Even if she tried for the rest of her life. Maya, Rose reached out. Those same trembling hands Maya had held 1,000 times in the dark at Golden Pines. Stay with me, child, please. 6 words. 6 words. And 19 months of guilt collapsed into a decision Maya already knew she didn't really have a choice about. 2 days later, she sat in Damian's office on the 32nd floor of Bellini Holdings in Midtown Manhattan, facing the man she had hated for nearly 2 years. Damian laid out his offer in the voice of a man used to closing $1,000,000 deals. $5,000 a month. Maya would come to the penthouse every day to care for Rose. In addition, he would pay off her entire $52,000 student loan debt. A new apartment in a safer neighborhood, health insurance, a driver. Maya listened, said nothing for 10 full seconds. Long enough for Damian to tilt his head slightly, like he wasn't used to people not responding immediately. Then she spoke. I'll care for Rose every day for as long as she needs me, but I won't take $5,000. I won't take debt payments. I won't take an apartment, a car, insurance, or anything from you. Damian raised an eyebrow. Why? Because I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Rose. And the moment I take your money is the moment you think you've bought me. The same way you thought you could buy care for your mother with a $17,500 check every month. That landed. Maya knew it landed because Damian's jaw tightened and his gray eyes darkened by half a shade. But he said nothing. And she didn't take it back. After Maya left, Victor closed the door and stood facing Damian. You're bringing a stranger into your home, Victor said. Into the place where you sleep, where you meet, where you keep your mother. She could be a risk. She could be someone's piece on the board. Damian looked at Victor for a long moment, then said in a tone that left no room for argument, run a background check. Everything from her birth certificate to the last time she bought gas. If it's clean, she stays. Victor nodded and left, but his face said clearly he would keep his eyes on this waitress until he was personally satisfied she wasn't a threat. And Maya, on the subway, ride back to Brooklyn that night, sat in the rattling car, staring at the black card she had finally decided to keep. Knowing exactly what she was doing, she was stepping into enemy territory, into the world of a man whose name the streets of New York whispered with fear, placing herself in a position any sane person would run from. But Rose needed her. And Maya Cole, the kid who grew up in foster care, the girl who slept in her car for 3 months, the woman who had promised herself she would never leave anyone behind, had never known how to walk away from someone who needed her. The first time Maya stepped into Damien's penthouse, she thought she had walked into a museum by mistake. The private elevator opened on the 47th floor. The first thing that met her feet was cold Italian marble seeping through the worn soles of her 2-year-old sneakers. The penthouse spread out like another world, soaring ceilings, floor-to-ceiling glass with a view of Manhattan she had only ever seen on postcards. Furniture so minimal and clean it radiated a kind of wealth that didn't need a price tag. Because if you had to ask the price, you didn't belong there. Black leather sofas, glass tables, abstract art that Maya didn't understand but knew cost more than the apartment she was renting. And cold not from the air conditioning, cold from emptiness. Not one family photo, not a single flower. Not a forgotten book on a table or a jacket draped over a chair. No sign at all that a real human being actually lived here, rather than just existed. Maya walked through the living room, the dining area, the long hallway, and stopped at Rose's room. This was the only place that breathed. Damien had filled his mother's room with everything she could ever need. Shelves full of mass-market romance novels, a big cushioned armchair by the window, soft wool blankets, an entire collection of herbal teas, clearly chosen by someone who had carefully studied her tastes. It was the only sign that Damien Bellini knew how to love. He just loved with a credit card instead of with his presence. Maya set her bag down and spoke to Damien, who was standing in the doorway, her voice not cruel, but not gentle either. "This place is beautiful and dead, like a luxury hotel no one ever actually checks out of." Damien didn't reply. He just looked at her for a moment, then walked into his study and closed the door, and Maya understood that was going to be their rhythm. She would say the truths no one else dared say, and he would retreat because he didn't know what to do with them. The first week was an undeclared Cold War. On the third day, Maya checked her bank account and found $2,500 deposited from an account she didn't recognize. She transferred it back within the hour. On the fifth day, another $2,500 appeared. She sent it back. On the seventh day, Damien mentioned over dinner that he was setting up a private team of 3 doctors, on call 24/7, for Rose. Maya set her fork down. She needs her son sitting beside her, she said, looking straight into his eyes. Right there in front of Rose and Victor, not a medical team. She had plenty of doctors at Golden Pines, and not one of them replaced you actually being there. Damien cut in. "You don't understand how complex my mother's health situation is. I cared for her for 14 months while you sent checks," Maya replied. The room froze. Victor stopped chewing. Rose looked down at her plate. Damien's fist tightened on the table, but he said nothing. And Maya knew she had gone too far, but she also knew she was right, and she had spent too long bowing her head to start doing it again. "You can buy this entire city," she said, softer now but no less firm, "but you can't buy respect, at least not mine." Dinner ended in silence. Under the table, Rose reached for Maya's hand and squeezed gently. Maya didn't know if it was a thank you or an apology. Maybe both. That night, Maya stayed up late because Rose couldn't sleep. Near 1 a.m, she went to the kitchen for water. And that was when she saw Victor Sorrell standing at the sink, both hands under running water, the water turning pin, cred. It wasn't Victor's blood. There were no wounds on him. It was someone else's blood, on his knuckles, under his fingernails, soaked into the seams of his black shirt. They looked at each other across the marble kitchen. Victor didn't flinch, didn't hurry, just looked at her with the calm eyes of a man doing exactly what he did every day. "You didn't see anything," he said, not a threat, just a statement of fact. Maya swallowed, turned around, walked back to Rose's room. She didn't run. Instinct told her running in front of that kind of man was a mistake. She lay on the living room sofa, pulled the blanket up, and tried to sleep, but couldn't, because through the closed door of Damien's study, his voice carried out, low and cold as a blade at someone's throat. "If he doesn't pay by Friday, make sure he understands the consequences." And this time, don't leave a trace, silence. Then a soft laugh, the kind with nothing joyful in it. Maya lay in the dark, eyes wide open, listening to her heart pound. And for the first time since stepping into this penthouse, she truly understood whose house she was living in. 3 weeks passed, and something strange began to happen that none of them had planned. Maya and Damien developed a routine. Every evening after Rose went to sleep, Maya stepped out onto the balcony to breathe before heading home. And Damien was there too, sometimes before her, sometimes after, like they both needed a pocket of space between the sealed penthouse and the open sky above the city. They didn't talk during the first week. They just stood a few feet apart, Damien with a glass of whiskey, Maya with a cup of tea, watching Manhattan flicker below like a carpet of lights. But the silence between them slowly shifted. From the silence of enemies to the silence of two very tired people, exhausted by the exact same thing. Then one night, exactly 3 weeks after Maya started coming to the penthouse, Damien asked, "Why don't you drink?" She was holding a cup of chamomile tea, leaning against the railing, the wind from the 47th floor pushing her hair back. She could have lied, could have said she just didn't like it, could have not answered at all, but there was something about the darkness and the height that made the truth easier to say. "My stepfather drank," she said, "every night, and every night he became someone else entirely. I promised myself when I was 13 I'd never touch it." Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Your mother," and stopped, like he wasn't sure he had the right to ask. Maya understood the question even without the words. She told it briefly, no more than necessary. Her mother died at 15, lung cancer, Rex, foster care, the Honda Civic in Walmart parking lots. All told in the same flat, even voice she had used with Layla. The voice of someone who had lived with these truths too long to still be cut by them. Or at least, who had learned how to hide the cuts. "The view from my apartment is a brick wall and sometimes a pigeon," she said, looking out at Manhattan. "And you have all this." Damien followed her gaze. "I've lived here 3 years and I barely see it anymore," he said quietly. "That's sad," Maya replied. "There's no one to share it with. I was too busy building an empire to notice I was building it alone," he said. He took a sip of whiskey. "My mother used to say, success without love is just expensive loneliness." I thought she was being dramatic. She wasn't. Silence settled between them. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was almost comfortable, like they had both shed a layer of armor without even realizing it. Maya looked at Damien and asked the question she had wanted to ask since day one. "Why did you abandon her for 4 years? I know doctors said visits upset her, but you're clearly not stupid. You built $1 billion company. Didn't any part of you suspect they were lying?" Damien set his whiskey glass carefully on the railing, like it might shatter if he gripped it too hard. "Honestly," he said, "I think I wanted them to be lying. I wanted an excuse not to go." He stared out at the city, unable to meet her eyes. "After my father left, my mother was everything to me. She worked herself into the ground to give me a future. And when I finally had the power to give her everything she deserved, I couldn't stand watching her fade." He paused. "But there was another reason. My world is dangerous, Maya. I have enemies, the kind who don't come for you directly. They come for the people you love. I kept my mother away partly because I was terrified someone would use her against me. In my world, they don't hit you. They hit who you love. So you ran," Maya said. Not a question. "Yes," Damien said. And Maya believed him. Not because the reason made perfect sense, but because of his voice when he said those 2 words. The voice of a man the whole city feared, who still couldn't bear to watch his mother forget his name. Maya was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. "Rose reminds me of my mother, the way she smiled even when she was hurting, the way she spoke about you with pride even though you never came." "She never spoke badly of you, Damien, not once, but I saw it in her eyes. Every time someone visited the facility, and it wasn't you, a little light in her eyes went out. And I hated you for that. I hated you for 4 years without ever meeting you." "And now?" Damien asked quietly. Maya looked at him, really looked. In the soft balcony light, the faint scar along his jaw nearly disappeared. And his gray eyes were no longer cold, just tired, lonely, and something else Maya didn't dare name yet. "Now I think you're broken like the rest of us," she said. "You just have more money to hide it." Damien laughed. A real laugh pulled out of him by surprise. "That might be the most accurate description of my life anyone's ever given me. I hate myself for it," he said after a moment. His voice so low the wind almost carried it away. "For those 4 years. For every night she cried for me and I wasn't there." "Good," Maya said. Her voice not cruel, but not soft either. "You should. But use that feeling to change, instead of using it to run again." They looked at each other across the narrow space of the 47th floor balcony, the city flickering below like millions of candles. And for the first time since they met, they truly saw each other, not a waitress and a mob boss, not the hater and the hated, but two people wounded by loss and loneliness, finding common ground where no one would ever have expected it. In the weeks that followed, something shifted between them that neither of them named. Maya no longer looked at Damien with that tightly wound hostility. Damien no longer treated her like a guest. He started treating her like family. They had small rituals. Dinner together every night, long conversations on the balcony after Rose went to sleep. Occasional walks through Central Park on Maya's days off, when Rose stubbornly insisted on going outside to breathe real air. Rose watched all of this unfold with a knowing smile that made both of them very uncomfortable. "She's matchmaking," Maya whispered to Damien one night. After Rose had commented for the 4th time that week about how beautiful Maya's eyes looked under the living room lights. "I know," Damien replied, clearly trying and failing to hide his smile. "She's not subtle at all. The first kiss happened on a Thursday night. Exactly 23 days after they met at Danny's diner. Rose went to bed early that night, complaining of being tired. But when Maya helped her into her room, Rose winked, with the slyness of someone who knew exactly what she was engineering. The balcony, their familiar place. That night, Manhattan looked almost unreal, lights flickering below like stars pinned to the earth. "I should go," Maya said, standing. "Early shift tomorrow." Damien stood too. "Let me call you a car." "I can take the subway, it's fine." "Josie, it's almost midnight." "Maya." She corrected herself with a small smile. He took her hand gently. "Let me do this one thing." She looked at his hand holding hers. The hand she knew had signed orders that made people afraid. The same kind of hand she had seen Victor wash someone else's blood off of. And yet, right now, it held her with a tenderness she hadn't believed it was capable of. She looked up at his face. In the city's soft glow, the faint scar along his jaw nearly disappeared, and his gray eyes were no longer cold. Just tired, lonely, and something she couldn't keep pretending she didn't see. "You're different from what I imagined," she said quietly. "When I pictured the man who abandoned his mother, I imagined someone cold, someone who cared about nothing but money. But you're not that man." "I was that man for a long time," Damien said. "I was exactly that man." He stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "And now I think I'm becoming someone else, someone I actually want to be." He lifted his hand to her cheek, giving her every chance to step back. "And a lot of that is because of you." Maya's breath caught. For a moment, they both stood completely still. Two people on the edge of something that could change everything. Then Maya rose on her toes and kissed him, soft at first, careful, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. Then Damien pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that left them both breathless. When they finally pulled apart, Maya's eyes were wide. "I've wanted to do that for 3 weeks, she admitted. "Only 3 weeks," Damien smiled. "I wanted to do that from the moment you yelled at me in the diner for being a terrible son. I didn't yell. You absolutely yelled. And I deserved it." Maya laughed, and the sound was the most beautiful thing Damien had heard in years. "What now?" she asked. Damien looked at her. "A waitress making $2, $340 a month. A 430 square foot apartment in Brooklyn. A woman who had loved his mother when he couldn't. who had somehow broken through every wall he had built over 4 years of isolation. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I know I don't want this to end, whatever this is." "I don't either," Maya said. She squeezed his hand. "But your world is very different from mine, Damien. I don't know if I belong here." "You belong wherever you choose," he said. "And I hope that includes here with me, with my mother, with whatever mess of a life I'm trying to rebuild." Damien's phone vibrated. He closed his eyes. Maya felt his whole body tighten. He checked the screen. "Victor, boss, there's a problem at the docks. We need you here." Damien closed his eyes again, resting his forehead against Maya's, his breath warm against her lips. "I have to go," she said softly. He released her hand, walked quickly through the living room, grabbed his jacket from the chair. As he stepped into the elevator and turned back, his suit jacket shifted. And Maya saw it, the black gun tucked at his lower back, resting there as naturally as keys in a pocket. A wallet in a jacket, a part of him he never took off. The elevator doors slid shut. Reality hit Maya like a bucket of ice water. She had just kissed a mob boss. Her lips were still warm from him, her skin still tingling where his hands had been. But in her mind, the image of that black gun burned bright as a neon sign. She stood alone on the 47th floor balcony. Manhattan, flickering below, cold wind threading through her hair, and she wrapped her arms around herself. Because her lips were still warm, but her chest had gone freezing cold. 6 weeks after the first kiss, everything shattered. Because of an envelope, Maya found it in her mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon after her shift. A thick manila envelope. No return address. Just a Westchester postmark and her name written in black ink on the front. She stood in the dim hallway of her building, turning it over in her hands, and something tightened in her gut. Because Westchester meant Golden Pines, and Golden Pines meant Rose, and nothing that came from there could ever be good news. She went upstairs, locked all 3 bolts on the door, sat on the bed, and opened the envelope with hands that were already shaking before she read a single word. The first document was an internal memo from Golden Pines management, stamped confidential, dated 3 years and 4 months earlier. The heading read, Patient Rose Bellini, recommended treatment protocol. Maya read, and every sentence was a knife. After reviewing Mrs. Bellini's file, we recommend continuation of the current sedation protocol. The patient's lucid episodes are becoming more frequent. However, we believe it is in the best interest of the facility to maintain the current dementia diagnosis. The monthly payment of $17,500 from Mr. Damien Bellini represents a significant revenue stream. Any suggestion that the patient's condition is improving may result in transfer to a lower care facility. Additionally, Mrs. Bellini has expressed a desire to contact her son. We recommend blocking all outgoing communication and ensuring the patient remains isolated from any external contact that could jeopardize our financial arrangement. Maya read that paragraph 3 times, the first time with her eyes, the second time with her mind, the third time with her stomach turning inside out as the true meaning of every single word landed. They knew, Golden Pines management had known for more than 3 years that Rose's condition was treatable. They had deliberately kept her sedated, deliberately misdiagnosed her, deliberately cut her off from the entire outside world. All to keep collecting that monthly check from Damien, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the second document. A handwritten letter clipped to a stack of printed emails. Maya recognized the handwriting immediately. The slightly right, slanted, rounded script of the woman who used to write on the whiteboard at the nurse's station every night. Maya, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to send what I should have sent months ago. I found these documents while clearing out the old management office. They were hidden in a locked drawer. The new director gave me the key. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what they did to Mrs. Bellini, and I'm sorry for what they did to you. Maya recognized the writer. Janet, the gentle night nurse who used to bring extra pudding for Rose on nights. Maya wasn't on shift. But there's something else you need to know, the letter continued. Something about Damian Bellini that changes everything. See the third set of documents, the emails dated 2 years ago. I'm sorry, Maya. I truly am. Janet, night nurse, Golden Pines. Maya's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the paper. She stared at the envelope, at the remaining stack of pages inside. She knew whatever was in the third set would change everything she thought she knew. She took a long breath, pulled out the final stack, and began to read. The third set was a 2-year chain of emails between Damian Bellini, his personal assistant, and the management of Golden Pines. And with every page Maya turned, another brick was pulled from the wall of hatred she had built over nearly 2 years. The first email, sent 2 years and 4 months earlier, said that Mr. Bellini was asking about his mother's condition, requesting an update, asking whether a visit would help. The reply from Golden Pines stated that family visits continued to agitate Mrs. Bellini, that they strongly recommended maintaining the current no-contact protocol, assuring Mr. Bellini that his mother was receiving the highest quality care. Maya turned the page. The next email, 1 month later, said Mr. Bellini wanted to set up a video call. The reply explained that video calls were unfortunately not feasible, that Mrs. Bellini did not recognize faces on a screen and became distressed with unfamiliar technology. Maya kept turning pages. Again and again and again, email after email, across 2 full years, the same pattern repeating like a cruel, endless spiral. Damian asked about his mother, refused. Damian requested a video call, refused. Damian asked to visit, refused. Every time with a new medical excuse. Every time phrased in language that sounded professional, reasonable, and clinical enough for a desperate son to believe the doctors knew better. During all the nights Maya sat beside Rose's bed, listening to her cry for the son who never came. During all the months, Maya stacked more and more hatred onto Damian Bellini. He had been on the other end, trying to reach her, trying to ask about her, trying to hear his mother's voice, and being blocked at every single step. Then Maya reached the final email in the chain, dated 18 months earlier. This one wasn't from an assistant. This one was from Damian himself. He wrote that he understood a visit wasn't possible, but asked that they please make sure his mother knew he loved her. That she be told he thought of her every single day, that if there was any change in her condition, any improvement at all, no matter how small, he be contacted immediately, because he would trade everything he had to see her smile at him one more time. Beneath that email, handwritten in blue ballpoint pen, the hurried, uneven scrawl of someone from Golden Pines management, there was a single line, no reply. Do not forward to patient. File with other Bellini correspondence. Maya sat on her bed in her 430 square foot Brooklyn studio, documents scattered around her like the shattered pieces of everything she had believed to be true. And she cried. She cried for Rose, the woman deliberately cut off from the son who loved her, kept in a fog of drugs so someone else could profit from her suffering, left to believe her child had forgotten her, when in reality he had been shouting into the dark, begging for someone to just tell his mother that he loved her. She cried for Damian, the man she had hated with fierce certainty for nearly 2 years, the man she had judged and despised every day while he had been writing late night emails, pleading with strangers to tell his mother he was there, and receiving nothing in return but silence, lies, and doors slammed shut over and over again. And she cried for herself, for the solid certainty she had carried for so long, that she knew exactly who Damian Bellini was, when in reality he too had been a victim, manipulated by the same people who manipulated Rose, kept away from his mother by the very hands he was paying to keep her safe. Maya didn't know how long she cried. Could have been 10 minutes, could have been an hour, but at some point the tears stopped, not because the pain eased, but because something else took its place, something hotter, sharper, far more dangerous than tears. Rage. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone had kept a mother and son apart for profit. Someone had watched Rose cry night after night and done nothing. Someone had blocked every attempt at contact and let two people suffer in silence for years. And Maya was going to find out who. She picked up her phone and called Damien. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and relaxed. The voice of a man having a good evening, expecting a good call. "Maya, I was just about to call you. Come to my place." Maya cut in. Something in her voice must have reached him right through the phone, because the line went completely silent. "Right now, Damien, there's something you need to see about Golden Pines, about your mother, about everything." The silence lasted 2 seconds. Then Damien's voice changed, no longer warm, no longer relaxed, just sharp and precise. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 14. Maya heard the car stop outside, the door slam, fast footsteps on the stairwell, because the building elevator had been broken for a month and no one had fixed it. When she opened the door, Damien stood there, Victor right behind him, both of them breathing hard from running up 4 flights of stairs. Maya looked at Victor, then at Damien. He waits outside. Victor didn't move, his eyes sweeping the apartment over Maya's shoulder. Checking for threats, as always, but Damien nodded. "Wait outside, Victor." Victor looked at his boss. Then at Maya, and for the first time since Maya had known him, something close to astonishment flickered across his stone face. The boss was taking orders from a waitress from Brooklyn. He stepped back into the hallway without a word, and Maya closed the door. Damien stood in the middle of her tiny studio and looked completely out of place. A black suit worth 6 months of her rent, polished leather shoes on peeling floorboards. But he wasn't looking at the apartment. He was looking at her face, and whatever he saw there drained the color from his own, before he read a single word. "Sit down," Maya said, pointing to the small kitchen table where all the documents were spread out. Damien sat. He picked up the first memo with a hand that had already started to shake, and Maya stood beside him, watching him read. She watched his skin tone fade from normal to gray, watched his jaw clench until she could see the muscle jumping under his skin, watched his gray eyes track each line more slowly than the last, because every sentence was a blow he had to absorb before he could read the next. "They knew?" Damien said when he finished the memo, his voice barely a whisper. "They knew she was treatable. They knew she was lucid. And they kept her sedated so I'd keep paying. Right on." Maya said softly. Damien read the email chain, read his own requests being blocked, archived, shoved into locked drawers like trash. Read the final email he himself had written 18 months ago. The one where he begged someone, anyone, to just tell his mother that he loved her. And the handwritten note beneath it, erasing everything he had tried to do 4 years, Damien said. And his voice broke right in the middle of those 2 words, in a way Maya had never heard from this man before. 4 years I trusted them. 4 years I thought my mother didn't recognize me anymore. 4 years I sent checks thinking I was doing the right thing, while they drugged her, pocketed my money, and threw my letters in the trash. His fist came down on Maya's small kitchen table. The whole apartment shook. Maya didn't flinch, didn't step back, wasn't afraid. She had lived with Rex long enough to know the difference between the rage of someone who wants to cause harm and the rage of someone who has been deeply, deeply hurt. "This was the second kind. This isn't your fault," Maya said, her voice steady and firm. "They manipulated you. They manipulated both of us. They're medical professionals. They had credentials and reputations and facilities. You trusted them with your mother. Anyone would have trusted them." Damien looked at Maya. The pain in his eyes was so deep it made her chest ache. Then the pain vanished, not slowly, all at once, like a switch flipping, and what replaced it was colder, harder, more frightening than anything Maya had ever seen on a human face. The gray eyes turned to steel. The jaw relaxed not from calm, but because the anger had passed the point of needing to show itself. His voice dropped flat and even. This was no longer Damien the grieving son. This was Damien Bellini. "The boss, I want to burn that place to the ground," he said. Silence. Then he closed his eyes, took a long breath. And when he opened them again, the steel was still there, but tempered with control. But first we tell my mother. She deserves to hear the truth from us. He stood and opened the door. Victor was standing exactly where he had been told to stand. Come in, Damien said. Victor stepped inside. Eyes scanning the documents, scanning Maya's face, scanning his boss's face, and instantly understood that something fundamental had just changed. Get me everything on Crestline Healthcare, Damien said, flat as a blade. Every board member, every financial transaction, every contract, every email, every phone call. I want to know what they eat for breakfast, and who signed off on keeping my mother sedated. Victor gave one single nod. Done, boss. He turned and left, and Maya watched him go, watched the machine ignite with a single command. The vast underground network she had feared and hated for weeks, now moving for the right reason. For the first time, Damien Bellini's dark power was aimed in the right direction. At the people who truly deserved it. They drove back to the penthouse in silence, Damien in the back seat with Victor. Maya beside him, the manila envelope resting on her lap like an unexploded bomb. No one spoke a word, because there were no words big enough for what they were about to do. Rose was sitting in the living room when they stepped off the elevator. Settled into her armchair by the window, a romance novel face down on her lap, the reading lamp casting a warm glow around her silver hair. She looked peaceful, she looked happy, and Maya hated that they were about to take that peace away. But truth doesn't wait, and Rose Bellini deserved to know why 4 years of her life had been stolen. Rose looked up as they entered, and she knew immediately. No one had to say a word. She looked at Damien's face, at Maya's red eyes, at the envelope, and the book slid off her lap onto the carpet without her even reaching for it. What is it? Rose asked, her voice calm, but her hands gripping the armchair. Damien, Maya, what happened? Damien sat beside his mother. He took her wrinkled hands in his own, gently, carefully, like holding something precious and fragile. Mom, he said, and his voice was so thick with feeling that Maya watched him swallow twice before he could continue. There's something you need to know about Golden Pines, about why I didn't visit you for 4 years, about everything. And he told her. Every document, every email, every lie. Maya stood nearby in silence, watching Rose's face change, and each stage of that change was a different kind of pain cutting through Maya's chest. First came confusion. Rose's eyes narrowing, like she couldn't quite grasp what she was being told. Then understanding crashed in, and confusion became horror, her mouth falling open, her hands shaking violently in Damien's grasp. Then horror became pain, pain so deep it seemed to age her face 10 years in 10 minutes, every line deepening, every feature heavy under the weight of betrayal. But then, beneath it all, something else surfaced. Steele, Rose Bellini, the woman who worked 3 jobs at once to raise her son alone, who survived 4 years of forced sedation and still came out whole. The woman Maya had loved from the very first night at Golden Pines because she refused to be broken. That woman straightened in her chair, and when she spoke, her voice didn't shake, even though tears were still running down her face. They took 4 years from me. Rose said, they took my son, they took Maya. They made me believe I was losing my mind, when in truth they were poisoning me with drugs so they could keep taking money. She turned to Maya, and in those aged eyes was a fire Maya recognized because she had seen it in her own reflection. You worked there. You know how it is inside. Help my son tear them apart. Yes. Maya said, her voice steady, I'll help. But that night, after Rose had fallen asleep and Maya was getting ready to leave, Damien's phone vibrated. Victor, Damien listened, and Maya watched his face change for the second time that day. But this time it wasn't pain. It was something darker, something closer to betrayal than pain could ever reach. He ended the call and stood very still for a long moment. His back to Maya, staring out at Manhattan flickering below. Victor found something. He said finally, his voice so flat it was more frightening than a shout. Tony, my uncle, Tony Bellini. Maya knew the name. Damien had mentioned him once on the balcony, his uncle, the man who used to run the family before Damien. The man Damien had stripped of power 5 years ago. Tony has hidden ownership stakes in Crestline Healthcare, Damien said. Each word dropped like a bullet. The corporation that bought Golden Pines. Tony knew my mother was being abused, and not only knew, he was the one who suggested keeping her sedated. He stayed silent for 4 years, using it as leverage for when he decided to try to take me down. Silence. My uncle knew my mother was being tortured and let it happen. Damien turned back to Maya. She saw the war on his face, between the man whose instincts were screaming for blood, and the man she and Rose were helping him become. She stepped closer, took his hand. Do this the right way, Court, let the law handle it. Maya, you don't understand my world. I understand your world, she said. I've seen Victor wash blood from the sink. I've heard you threaten people through closed doors. I'm not naive. But if you want to be worthy of your mother, worthy of the man you're trying to become, your way isn't the right way. Not this time. Damien looked at her for a long time. The war still there, but slowly, the brighter side won. Fine, he said, your way, court first. But if the court fails, the court won't fail, Maya said. Because the truth is on our side, and because you have 14 lawyers and $3 million to make sure the truth gets heard. The lawsuit took 8 months. Damien pulled in 14 lawyers from 3 different firms, the biggest names in Manhattan, who normally wouldn't share the same case. But when Damien Bellini called, people didn't say no. Legal fees passed $3 million before the first hearing even opened. Maya sat in glass conference rooms on the 60th floor 3 times a week and recounted everything she remembered from Golden Pines. Every staff member, every routine, every policy change after Crestline took over, every small thing she had noticed and dismissed because she had only been a 24-year-old nursing assistant. Who was going to listen to her anyway? Medication schedules changed without any explanation. Patients who had been clear headed suddenly turning dull after doctors were swapped. Medical records locked in rooms staff weren't usually allowed in. Small fragments that once looked like messy management, but now assembled into a deliberate, ugly picture of systemic cruelty. Janet, the night nurse who sent the envelope, was protected under Damien's orders. He assigned 2 bodyguards to watch her around the clock, without Janet knowing who they were. Only that the lawyers assured her she'd be kept safe. Maya knew the guards were Damien's people. She didn't tell Janet, because some truths are better left unsaid. Then Tony made his move. 2 months after the suit was filed, Janet opened her apartment door in Westchester and found an unmarked envelope on her doormat. Inside, photographs of her going to work, photographs of her daughter walking to school, and a slip of paper with 4 words. Withdraw your testimony. Janet called Maya in tears at 11 at night. Maya called Damien. Damien called Victor. 30 minutes later, Victor confirmed the envelope had been sent by men working for Tony Bellini. By the next morning, those 2 men had vanished from Westchester. No one heard from them again. Maya didn't ask for details. She had learned, in Damien's world, there are questions whose answers will keep you awake for the rest of your life. Damien sent a message to Tony through channels only family understood. If you touch anyone connected to this case, I'll consider it a declaration of war. And you know, I don't declare war without finishing it. The family conflict simmered beneath the lawsuit like lava under the earth, and Maya felt its heat every single day. She was living between 2 worlds whose border kept getting thinner. By day, glass rooms, tailored lawyers, calm statements, careful words. By night, lying in the penthouse, listening to Damien speak behind closed doors in a voice that could make people disappear. A voice she never quite got used to, even though she had gotten used to almost everything else. One night, 3 months before the trial, Maya and Damien sat on their familiar balcony. Rose was asleep, the city flickered below. Maya was thinking about Janet, about the photographs of her daughter walking to school, about the fact that Tony Bellini had been willing to threaten a nurse and a child just to protect his money. The question slipped out before she could decide if she wanted the answer. "If we win this in court, if everything gets handled the right way, do you promise you won't use other methods, your methods?" The silence lasted long enough for Maya to turn and look at him. Damien was watching her, on his face the familiar battle, the old man pulling one way, the new man pulling the other. And every time that battle happened, Maya was the ground it was fought on. "I promise," he said at last. 2 words, simple, but Maya understood their weight, because Damien Bellini wasn't a man who made empty promises. He either said nothing or said something, and kept it no matter the cost, and it was the first promise he had ever made to anyone other than his mother. The day Rose Bellini testified was a day everyone in that courtroom would remember for the rest of their lives. She was wheeled in, 76 years old, thin silver hair neatly brushed back, wearing the simple floral blouse Maya had helped her pick out that morning, looking so fragile that a strong wind might carry her away. Yet when she lifted her eyes to the courtroom, they were the eyes of a woman with absolutely no intention of breaking. Maya sat in the front row beside Damien. He wore a black suit, back straight, face unreadable, looking exactly like the mob boss the newspapers always drew. But beneath the table, his hand gripped Maya's so hard his knuckles had gone white, and she didn't pull away. Because she understood if she let go, he would shatter. The attorney guided Rose through the opening questions. Her name, her age, how long she was at Golden Pines. Rose answered cleanly, steadily. Then the attorney asked if she could tell the court about her experience at Golden Pines. Rose took a long breath, looked down at her hands resting in her lap, then lifted her head and began to speak. "Fog," she said. "That's what I remember most, fog in my head that never lifted. I woke up every morning and everything was blurred like seeing the world through a rain-soaked window. Some days I didn't remember my own name. Some days I didn't know where I was. And I thought I was losing my mind. Thought my brain was slowly dying because that's what they told me. But my brain wasn't dying. They were killing it with medication, with doses carefully calculated to keep me foggy enough not to ask questions, but alive enough to remain worth $17,500 a month." The courtroom went completely silent. Rose continued, and her voice trembled for the first time. "I cried for my son every night, Damien, my son. I begged them to let me call him, begged them to tell him I missed him, and they told me, with gentle voices and patient smiles, that my son didn't want to come, that he was busy, that seeing him would make me worse. They made me believe that the child I raised alone, the child I worked 3 jobs for 15 years to feed and educate, had forgotten me." Rose paused, wiped her tears with the back of her hand, then straightened again. "Then they fired Maya, the only person in my life who stayed with me at 3 in the morning to read to me, brush my hair, and hold my hand when I was afraid. They fired her because she cared too much, because she objected to the cuts in care, because she was a nursing assistant, easily replaced, and her kindness was inconvenient to their profits." Rose looked directly at the defense table, where 3 former administrators and 2 doctors sat, and her voice no longer shook. "It hardened into steel. They traded my life for checks. They traded my son's pain for profit. They traded 4 years I will never get back for a line item on a quarterly financial report." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice softened, but grew stronger, like steel made thin enough to cut without force. "But you didn't take everything. You didn't take my spirit. You didn't take my ability to love. And you didn't take my son." She turned toward Damien, and Maya saw his eyes, red and shining, never leaving his mother's face. "He came back. He found me. He brought Maya back to me. You kept us apart for 4 years, and we still found our way back to each other." Rose turned back to the courtroom, to the jury, to the judge, to every single face, because love wins. Love always wins. The courtroom stayed utterly silent for 5 seconds. 10 seconds, 15 seconds. The kind of silence so heavy you could hear the lights buzzing overhead. Then the first sound that broke it was a sob, not from Rose, from a woman on the jury, her face buried in her hands. Then the person beside her, then another. Maya sat beside Damien, her hand clasped in his. She felt him squeeze so hard it hurt. But she didn't let go, because some moments are too big for words, some pain too deep to explain, and all you can do is hold the person beside you and hope that's enough. She turned to look at him. Tears were streaming down the face of Damian Bellini, the boss New York feared. Down over the faint scar along his jaw, down his chin, onto the lapel of his black suit. And he didn't wipe them away. Didn't hide them, didn't feel any shame. He just sat there holding Maya's hand and cried, because his mother had fought a battle he couldn't fight for her. And she had won. At the same time, Damian handled Tony Bellini in a way Maya never expected, and it made her respect him more than anything he had ever done. He didn't use violence, no guns, no threats, no anything from the old world she had glimpsed in those late nights. He used power, the very power he had spent his whole life building, his network of alliances, his financial leverage, the loyalty of people who chose to follow him and not Tony. And he stripped his uncle of everything, methodically, ruthlessly, without spilling a single drop of blood. Every business ally Tony relied on, gone within a week. Every account frozen. Every door Tony had once walked through on the strength of the Bellini name, slammed shut in his face. Damian didn't need to make anyone disappear. He only had to make sure Tony Bellini became invisible in the very city he had once helped run. Tony met Damian one last time in the penthouse study, the same room where Maya had once heard Damian's voice going cold as a blade through a closed door. Maya wasn't in the room, but Damian told her about it the next night on the balcony. He said the family needed an iron hand. Damian told her, his tone flat with the finality of a closed chapter. He said a soft heart would get me killed. He said I was getting weak because of a waitress and an old woman. What did you say? Meyer asked. I told him the family needed a man who knew how to protect his own, and he had failed at that. Tony Bellini vanished from New York 2 days after that meeting. No one knew where he went. No one asked, because in Damian's world, when someone was exiled from the family, their name simply stopped existing. The verdict came 3 weeks after Rose testified. $47 million in damages, a state record in New York for nursing home abuse cases. But the money wasn't the point. The point was the criminal charges. 3 former Golden Pines administrators charged with elder abuse, insurance fraud, and intentional bodily harm. 2 doctors, including the one who signed the sedation orders for Rose, and at least 17 other patients, charged with medical malpractice and complicity in patient abuse. Golden Pines was permanently shut down. Crestline Healthcare was forced into a full compliance overhaul across all 37 of its remaining facilities under court supervision. But what kept Meyer awake at night wasn't the dollar amount or the sentences. It was the 17 other patients, 17 human beings like Rose, deliberately misdiagnosed so their families could be drained for money. 17 people kept in a fog of drugs when they might have been clear-headed, might have spoken, might have held their children and grandchildren, might have lived their last years with awareness and dignity. 4 of those 17 died while receiving inadequate care at Golden Pines. 4 people who never got the chance to be found. No Meyer reading to them at 3 in the morning. No Damian coming back for them. No thick envelope mailed out in time to save them. 4 people who died in silence, and that truth weighed more than $47 million. Heavier than any verdict a court could hand down. After the trial, after the cameras and reporters and tearful hugs on the courthouse steps, Damian didn't take Rose and Maya to some fancy restaurant. He told the driver to head to Brooklyn, to Danny's Diner, to the corner booth where Rose had first recognized Maya nearly 20 months ago. The bell rang as they walked in. Danny Petro looked up from behind the counter, saw Maya, saw Rose in her wheelchair, saw Damian and the 2 men in black, then looked back at Maya, and the old man's face crumpled in the way Maya knew meant he was trying very hard not to cry. He had watched the news, the whole country had watched the news. Sit down, Danny said, his voice rougher than usual. It's on the house. Anything you want today. Your money means nothing in my diner. Meyer ordered French toast. because that was what her mother used to make on Sunday mornings, before Rex, before the cancer, before everything fell apart. Rose ordered a Denver omelet, because she had liked it the first time she ate here, and because she said it reminded her that life still holds delicious surprises. Damien studied the menu longer than necessary, then ordered 3 scrambled eggs with wheat toast. Maya looked at him in surprise. That was the order from table 4, the regular morning customer's order, the dish she had served hundreds of times. "I pay attention," Damien said, meeting her eyes, and for the first time in that long, exhausting day, something close to a real smile touched his mouth. It's what people order when they're happy. They ate in comfortable silence, the weight of 8 months of legal battle slowly lifting from their shoulders. Then Rose set her fork down and looked at both of them with that expression Maya recognized, the look she wore when she was about to say something important. "I've been thinking about what comes next," Rose said. Damien and Maya glanced at each other. "What's next, Mom?" "I'm 76 years old. I lost 4 years in a fog and 8 months in courtrooms. I want to do something meaningful with the time I have left." She turned to Maya. "I want to start a foundation for nursing home residents who don't have families. No one checking if they're being treated right. No one visiting. No one asking questions. No one noticing if they just disappear." Rose took both their hands across the table. "I want to hire people like Maya, people who actually care, send them into nursing homes to be guardians, watchers, angels, whatever word you want to use. So no one has to go through what I went through." "Mom, that'll cost," Damien started. "You're a billionaire, Damien. Don't talk to me about cost," Rose said. And there was that mischievous sparkle in her eyes he remembered from when he was a little boy. "Besides, my son has been trying to make up for 4 lost years. This is how. What's it called?" Maya asked softly. Rose looked at her, then at Damien, and her smile widened. "Never forgotten foundation. Because everyone deserves to be remembered. Everyone deserves someone who shows up for them." Silence settled around the table, the beautiful kind, the kind that comes when 3 people are looking in the same direction. Then Rose broke it, in the tone she used when she knew exactly how much trouble she was causing. "And my future daughter-in-law will run the foundation after she finishes nursing school." Damien turned red in a way Maya had never seen from this feared mob boss. Red rising from his collar all the way to his ears. He stared down at his eggs like 3 scrambled eggs were the most fascinating thing in the world. "Mom, what? I have eyes. I have a brain. I'm 76, not blind." Maya shook her head, laughing, but she didn't deny it. And under the table, her hand found Damien's. She squeezed, and he squeezed back, and Rose watched their joined hands with the satisfied smile of someone who had known the ending all along. 18 months later, a Sunday morning in the penthouse, sunlight pouring through the floor, the ceiling windows, spilling across the bed that Maya sometimes still couldn't believe was hers. She lay on her side, watching Damien sleep, his face at rest, stripped of every layer of armor he wore during the day, the faint scar along his jaw softened by the morning light, dark lashes casting shadows on his cheeks. She thought, this is the face Rose sees when she looks at her son. Not a boss, not a feared man, just the boy she raised alone on 3 jobs and 15 years of 4 hours of sleep a night. The phone on the nightstand buzzed. Maya reached for it and read the message. "Are you up yet? Is he still sleeping? Tell him to call his mother. I need the foundation meeting schedule this week. And ask him if you've finished your nursing certification yet." Damien stirred. "Mom, she's asking if I finished my degree," Maya said, groaning softly. "I've got 3 classes left. Tell her to stop asking. She says she needs you fully certified before the foundation can hire you as director of patient advocacy. Tell her I'm trying. Tell her yourself. She's making waffles." Maya laughed, set the phone down, and took Damien's hand. There were mornings she still couldn't believe this was real. 18 months ago, she was a waitress making $2, $340 a month, living in a 430 square foot apartment in Brooklyn, carrying $52.0 0 in student debt, and a heart full of grief for patients she had been forced to leave behind. Now she was engaged to the man everyone feared, a man who had paid off her debt without asking a single question, living in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, finishing her nursing degree so she could help run the never-forgotten foundation that Rose had built from the ashes of 4 stolen years. But the money wasn't what mattered, the penthouse wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the family she had found. A family built not on blood, but on choice, on showing up for each other every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Damien, Maya said softly. He opened his eyes, gray and gentle in the morning light. What is it? Maya reached into the nightstand and drawer and pulled out a small envelope. I was going to wait until tonight, but I can't. Damien took it, a confused look on his face. Inside was a grainy black and white image, almost impossible to make out at first glance. The doctor confirmed it yesterday, Maya said. Her voice trembling just slightly. 8 weeks. We're having a baby, Damien. Silence stretched long. Damien stared at the ultrasound image. His expression unreadable. Then he looked up, and his eyes filled with tears. We're having a baby, he repeated. Barely above a whisper, he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. She felt his warm tears on her neck. The man who had spent 4 years running from love, who had convinced himself that money could replace being present, who had nearly lost everything because he was too afraid to just show up, was crying with pure joy at the thought of becoming a father. I'll be there, Damien said, pulling back to look at her. His voice fierce, every moment, every step. I won't miss a thing. He paused. His voice breaking. Our child will never know the world I grew up in. I'll make sure of that. Maya touched his face gently. I know that's not who you are anymore. Not anymore. He nodded. You and my mother taught me that. You taught me what it really means to love someone. To show up when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Should we tell Mom together? Damien helped her out of bed, took her hand, and they walked through the penthouse together, past the balcony where they had first spoken honestly, past the living room where Rose read her paperback romances every afternoon, past the photo wall, now filled with pictures of the 3 of them, outside the courthouse on verdict day, at Danny's diner for their celebration, at the launch of the never-forgotten foundation, surrounded by volunteers and the families of patients they had helped, a family built not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the simple act of showing up. In the kitchen, Rose was making waffles, humming an old song Maya recognized from the nights she had read to her at Golden Pines. Rose looked up as they entered. Her eyes narrowed immediately. You too have that look, she said, the something's happening look. What are you hiding from me? Maya and Damien glanced at each other, then spoke at the same time. You're going to be a grandmother. The waffle iron hissed as Rose forgot about it completely. Her hands flew to her mouth, tears spilled over, the same tears she had cried in court at the foundation launch. In every single moment of joy that had filled the past 18 months. A baby, she whispered. She crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and wrapped both of them in her arms. Her son, her future daughter-in-law, a family reborn from the ashes of 4 stolen years. I thought I had lost everything, Rose said, her voice muffled against their shoulders. When they locked me in that place and took my memories, I thought my life was over. But look at us now. Look at what we have. Maya held tighter, feeling Damien's arms around both of them, feeling the warmth and love filling that kitchen on an ordinary Sunday morning. This is what matters, she said softly. Not the money, not the lawsuit, not the foundation. This family being together, really showing up for each other. That sounds nice. Damien said, eyeing his mother with suspicion. But Mom, you're burning the waffles. Rose swore and rushed back to the waffle iron. And the moment dissolved into laughter and chaos, and the quiet miracle of a family breakfast. But beneath all of it, the truth remained. There are things you never forget. There are people you never let go. And love, real love, the kind that shows up and stays and fights no matter how hard things get, always wins. This story is a reminder that sometimes the greatest thing we can do for someone isn't giving them something expensive or grand. It's simply being there, remembering their name, holding their hand in the dark, and never walking away when they need us most.